Would you like to reach our film and TV review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today. Welcome to filmandtvreview.com. Catch the latest film, TV and streamed show reviews every week. The views and opinions expressed by the authors and those providing comments are theirs alone. They do not reflect the views, opinions or position of filmandtvreview.com or their respective parent companies or affiliates. Filmandtvreview.com makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and is for entertainment purposes only. Episodes may contain adult humor and language. For full terms and conditions, see filmandtvreview.com.
Hello and welcome to the filmandtvreview.com podcast. I'm James, I'm your host for today, and today we're talking about the Scream franchise. Started in 1996 and the latest one, Scream 6, is now in cinemas as we record this in 2023. So Richard, this was sort of something that you'd started watching. You've watched all 6 recently, is that correct?
Indeed, yeah.
What are your thoughts on the entire franchise?
I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest, to watch all of them so close to each other, let's say. I have watched the Scream 1, let's call it this way, back in the day, when I was a teenager at the end of the 90s, and I think Scream 2, but I wasn't sure, to be honest, if I just saw some scenes in it, and that's it. Back in the day, it scared me a lot, to be honest. The first one, especially. And the first scene, I'll get into details afterwards, what scares me the most of that franchise or not. But then, I kind of gave up, not because I wasn't interested, because I just saw actually the third one. I don't think the reception was great back in the day. Then actually there's a huge gap, and then I saw the fourth one coming, etc. Yeah, I think that at the point when the fourth one was released, I was thinking, okay, that's weird. I thought it was part of this old trend, the nostalgia trend of Hollywood, saying actually let's try to get all the 90s and 80s IPs back on the screen. And that's why I couldn't care less, to be fair. But it's like, so recently when the 6 was released, or at least was announced to be released, and I heard great reviews for the 6th one, I said, okay, let's give it a shot. Especially because that's what I was telling you and Jason, that found out actually that all of them were on Paramount Plus, actually. So that was a good opportunity to actually do some kind of a week marathon. And that's what I did. Once every night, space of a week, as I watched the 5 first ones before watching Scream 6 a couple of days ago. So what do I think about the first 5 ones? Let's start with this. So Scream 1, I still consider it actually to be a very good movie. That holds up very well, even 25, 26 years later, 27 years later. What I mean is that, although it can be funny to watch it with your eyes of the 21st century, let's say, for some tropes that you use, I thought actually that I said it might be, and you prove me wrong, tell me if I'm right, it might be the most gruesome, the one actually with the most, until the number 6, the most blood in it, if I use that word. I said the first scene, I think, is extremely scary, to be honest, which is becoming like extremely part of the pop culture when there's a girl alone in a huge house, and there's a guy calling saying, "What's your scariest movie?" Obviously. But yeah, the way actually that he kills her boyfriend and her, I think it might actually been the goriest scene until Scream 6, sorry, in my opinion. And then, yeah, it set the tone for the whole franchise. These characters, even people who don't know Scream know about these characters, I guess. Sidney Prescott has become, a character quite well known. Even Courtney Cox, who was already famous for Friends back in the day. I'm guessing actually people actually also know that she was known for this franchise as well. So yeah, no, I think it was a good movie. Although I said, it's not only an horror movie, right? It's also obviously a murder mystery. And that's what I liked maybe the most about the franchise, because I've never been a huge horror fan. The murder mystery in the first one is good and bad. I don't know how to say that, because when I watched it again recently, I remember who was the killer in the first one. I knew it would be, well, we are spoilers. We can say spoilers, obviously, in this chat, right, James? No? Okay, we agree with that.
Yeah, so we're going to, just as word of warning, if you haven't seen any of the Scream franchise, we are going to go into spoilers. We'll probably try, if possible, to lay off of Scream 6 going to the top spoiler, because it's still out, but all the others are fair game, I think, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, so for the first one, yeah, the fact that actually it is Scott Ulrich, character, Billy Loomis, and his crazy friend, the Stu, the main killers. So it is a surprise in a way, but now that I knew who he was the main killer, when you look at the screen, the first one, every single time he's on screen, he looks like actually a killer. So, and obviously I know that it was intentional, because they knew from the get-go where this was heading. So I think it was very smart when you think about it. Actually, but they show you in your face with a killer. So I think that they show you so much that actually nobody's going to believe that he's actually the killer. And yeah, so I said, besides the fact that it is the goriest movie, it is also, pretty well done because everything seems a bit new as a slasher movie, with the fact that, as I said, there is a murder mystery, that there is teenagers doing things that make no sense to me. When there is a serial killer in your town, you go in on a party until 2 a.m. But I don't know. That's actually a recurring problem in these movies. Actually, these teenagers are still so stupid that they keep going on parties, even there is a guy running around killing people. So yeah, I enjoyed the first one in a nutshell. Then the second one was all right. I will not say more, because in my opinion, and that's where actually, in a way, it's smart, but at the same time, it's not that smart. From the second one onwards, the Scream movies try to address the problems of franchise, of sequels, of prequels, etc. And they make fun of the whole cinema industry of the late 90s, of the 2000s, even of the 2010s and 2020s. They do it very well. But at the same time, they make their own mistakes, if I may use that word, because in the end, and that's why I was saying maybe it's not a good thing that I watched the Scream movies, all of them in the same week, at least the first 5 ones, is that actually when you look at the structure of the plot, they are extremely similar one to another in the end. So I'm not saying that it's easy to write a movie, and it's easy to write a Scream movie. I will not be that pretentious, but I don't think it is the most difficult task in the world when you think about it. You just have to figure out, okay, who's going to be the killer this time? And let me create a crazy backstory to explain why he's doing that. And that's it. And then you just recreate the same stuff. And the sequel, Scream 2, is kind of this. They try to create something new with the introduction of a movie within the movie that is a remake of Scream 1, which is funny, named Stab. But in the end, it is the same plot structure. And the killers, one of them again is related to either Sydney or Billy. And this is going to be my only problem with the franchise is that I think that except for Scream 4, every single, and I will not talk about Scream 6, I'm talking about the first five ones, every single Scream, at 1 to 5, there is a relation to either Sidney Prescott, the killer is either related to Sidney Prescott or Billy Loomis. So I'm saying, okay, so yeah, I understand actually that revenge is important. But at the same time, it feels a bit like copy-paste, in my opinion, on that part. And that's why I was saying to you, James, when we were joking about trying to rank them, to actually rank the different Scream movies. That's why I actually put Scream 4 very high in my rankings, because I thought that Scream 4 was, again, the same structure with the murder mystery stuff, the teenagers doing stupid shit. But at the same time, at least at the end, the two killers, when they explain their motives, you can see that the writers then went all the way into criticism of the society it was 2011, I believe. And I thought it was smart. I think that's what Scream needed. And that's what made Scream in the first place put them on the map, let's say in 1996, is trying to criticize some parts of our society and the problems of our society in a way, or at least problems in the teenagers of this generation. And in the fourth, the main character, who is actually the killer, played by Emma Roberts, explained that she's doing that. She's dumb. She's just doing that just because she wants to become famous. Literally, she wants to have what's the famous sentence of I think it's Oscar Wilde or Andy Warhol, when he says actually that everybody in the future will want 50 minutes of fame. That's what she wants. So she wants actually to kill everyone around around her own neighborhood just to become famous. That's it. And obviously it's dumb. But that being said, when I think there's a monologue or dialogue between her and her accomplice, whoever it was, I don't remember. She explains that nowadays, through social media, through YouTube, through etc., and we are in 2011, by the way, I think, when this movie was released, or early 2010. It says we all want actually to be famous just by doing crazy shit. Sorry for my language. And I'm thinking, well, there's kind of some truth in this, unfortunately. And I would not be surprised, I'm sad to say, but I would be surprised actually if there are teenagers in our world who actually can think about that kind of thing, saying, okay, we're going to do something very illegal, becoming very criminal, just actually so people talk about us. And that's why actually I liked Scream 4 more than any other sequel, more than Scream 5 or Scream 3, Scream 2. Scream 3, Scream 3, I don't know what happened with Scream 3, in my opinion. It's very strange, by the way, because if you remove Scream 3, the franchise has at least decent movies that are still watchable, still enjoyable. Scream 3, honestly, if you don't take a step back and you don't accept it as a joke, you will not have a good experience, in my opinion. Because it is over the top all the time. The characters are acting very strangely, like actually they are almost as a parody of themselves. Especially actually there is an Afro-American character, and I was thinking, but that's such a stereotype for this character that is so stupid. The killer at the end, the ending with the guy who is actually I think he's a step brother of Sidney Prescott, who actually was kind of a mastermind behind everyone, etc. I was thinking, what is going on here? So yeah, I really didn't like this one. surprisingly, because it did follow the same plot structure with murder mysteries and things like that. And it tried to be also the mise en abîme with being meta, etc. But it's just, as I said, very bad acting. The whole cast, even original actors and actresses, and bad writing, just bad writing. I just don't understand. There are some scenes actually that you can find online, people making fun of the scenes, the action scenes, let's say, when Ghostface appear, is definitely not scary at all. It's not scary at all, which is a problem for a Scream movie. So that's Scream 3 for me. And then, I'll finish by saying that Scream 5 was, technically, I understand that Scream 4 was supposed to be the beginning of a new trilogy. I think that Scream 5 is more the beginning of a new era with new main characters, with the two sisters, one played by Jenna Ortega and the other, I don't know their name, to be honest. It's more that. That being said, Scream 5, I enjoyed it more than Scream 6, but we will talk about Scream 6 maybe later on. I think Scream 5 was a good movie, to be honest. But it started to have an issue, in my opinion. Scream 5 especially. We can discuss if people have the same feeling as I do, but at that point in Scream 5, I was thinking, okay, we are not watching teenagers anymore fighting Ghostface, but we are watching X-Men or superheroes, because I don't understand how many times over the franchise some of the characters have been stabbed or shot or both, and they are still completely fine. So, which I don't understand, to be honest. But and Scream 5 for me was the main problem is this, that actually I started to realize that it started to make no sense anymore. We talk about Scream 6, as I said, maybe later, my feelings about Scream 6 and the future of the franchise. I have a bad feeling that since it's still successful, we're going to have plenty more of Scream stuff coming. And I hope that it will not face the same issues as other franchises where they run for too long, unfortunately. But anyway, money is more important than everything else in Hollywood. So what do I know? So that's my overall feelings, James.
Thanks, Richard. Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Well, there's a lot I could say about the franchise and the behind the scenes stuff. I think actually it was also a response to what Richard was saying about Scream 3 and what happened, because there's actually been a lot of behind the scenes stuff with various of the Scream films. I guess my personal favorite is the first one, because that's the one that kind of it just, if you just watch it as it is, it's really good for what it is. Murder mystery, a lot of meta stuff. You have characters that know the genre, but you also have a killer who knows the genre. And the whole idea of we're going to do spoilers, two killers was something new at that time. And the idea of, you watch a horror film, a killer's in one space, but then they pop up in another space. It's like, do they have teleportation? Well, now they explain it is because it's two killers, and then they have cell phones now and they're able to communicate. So, it was something new at the time. They used the technology, and that being said, not each of them, but a number of the films have behind the scenes things that kind of changed what eventually happened. There was Scream 2, which part of the script leaked online, and at that time, the internet was something very, very new. I mean, this is the late 90s, so they weren't really familiar with the idea of, okay, maybe we better keep this from appearing online. What's online? They didn't know internet at that point. But then part of the script leaked online, and so they had to go back and change certain things. I think originally in Scream 2, they were supposed to have 3 killers, not just 2. So I think they kind of condensed 2 of the killers into, I guess, Mickey, whoever was the other killer. And so that's basically what happened there. But what happened in the case of Scream 3, they weren't originally going to do whatever they wound up doing with Scream 3. That wasn't their original intent. They were actually going to do a whole thing where there was going to be like, they would find a Ghostface killer, but then they'd find a whole bunch of Ghostface killers. And there'd be like a whole cult following type of thing.
Ah.
And I think some of those ideas later made their way onto, I guess Kevin Williamson worked on The Following, the TV program. So some of those ideas made their way to that. And the reason they didn't do the whole cult thing and the whole idea of like violent whatever coming out of the woodwork is because when the film was still in development, before they actually started filming, there was the infamous, at least in this part of the world, Columbine high school shooting. And, since then, there have been, unfortunately, a lot of high school shootings in the U.S. Now it's like, shrug your shoulders. But at that time, that was like a really huge deal. And there was a whole sense of, we have to tone down violence in media. We have to do this. We have to do that. So they basically dropped the whole cult thing at that time. I mean, eventually made its way in a different format, a different program altogether. But they went with the whole Hollywood thing instead. And the other thing is that they toned down the violence because originally there was going to be more violence in the film than what there was. And Scream 3 is seen as more comedic than horror or violent. And that's because they wanted to tone down the violence because of Columbine. And not necessarily their own choice, but because of pressure of whatever. The other thing with Scream 3 is that they were originally going to go with, not originally, but during the course of development, they were going to go with two killers. And so it wasn't just going to be Roman Bridger as the killer. They were also going to have Angelina Emily Mortimer, I guess the actress's name, as the other killer.
Okay.
So they, I guess at some point decided, well, instead of doing the two killer thing, we'll just have Roman Bridger be the one. And so if the film feels totally different or feels different, that's kind of the reasons why. Also, I think the other thing is that I don't think Kevin Williamson was involved at that point. I think he was busy with Dawson's Creek, which I guess he was the showrunner for. So he wasn't as involved. So that's, again, another reason why. So, I mean, given all those circumstances, I think the film is all right for what it is. It's obviously not what they originally intended, but given those circumstances. And the other thing is, after a decade, and they went back to the franchise, Scream 4, they were going to use that to kick off a trilogy. And if you watch Scream 4, especially the end, you just watch certain things, you're sort of like, well, certain things don't kind of jive. And that's because, and I guess I could do spoilers for Scream 4, I guess 2011. Jill Roberts was originally going to survive at the end. I don't know if she was going to kill Sidney or what was going to happen there, but originally Jill was going to survive and become like a villain protagonist for like a new trilogy.
Okay.
So if you watch Scream 4, and there's like that final scene with the news reporter talking about Jill Roberts being a survivor or something, and it's like, that doesn't make sense because we just saw her die. That doesn't make sense. It's because she was originally going to survive for a couple of more films.
Okay.
And that didn't work out. So, that's why that happened. So, I mean, I thought Scream 4 was kind of good for bringing that villain protagonist thing. That was something unique. The idea of, there's like a character that we're kind of watching and are rooting for, and then they turn out to be the villain. That actually was done. Well, I don't want to spoil because it's a different franchise. There was actually a film that came out a couple of years before, a sort of remake that they also did that kind of thing. So the idea of like, this is the character who's like the victim, but they're actually the killer. It's probably been done elsewhere, but so, and also because Emma Roberts has kind of done a lot with the horror thing. She's been in Scream Queens and American Horror Story. So it's kind of interesting to see that's how she kind of got her start with being like in the horror genre or horror-ish. And I thought Scream 5 was all right. I have my own issues with the current Scream movie. I won't say too much about that because it's still in cinemas. I like certain aspects, but then certain things just make me go, So I'll just leave it at that. So I'll just leave it at that. Maybe some other time, when people have had a chance to see it, I'll mention more. There's also the Scream series, which I don't know, a television program. I don't know. It was on MTV in the US. And that was kind of weird because they did 2 seasons and a made-for-TV movie with a group of characters, but then they decided to do a total reboot, and not finish that story up, and then do a 3rd season with a completely different group of characters, completely different whatever. And it's just like, well, you didn't finish up the story from the first 2.5, whatever. I understand that some of the actors weren't available and all that, but it's just like, couldn't they have wrapped it up somehow? And it's not really part of the franchise, but I just want to mention Scream Queens a little bit, because that was sort of like a satire of this. I mean, I know Scream itself is somewhat satirical, and then you have the Scary Movie franchise. That's a whole other thing. But Scream Queens, I thought, was kind of like that idea of like, everyone's a suspect, everyone's a killer, but taking it to a more comical level. And it's done by Ryan Murphy, so he plays up a lot more of the camp, a lot more of the humor. And it's pretty good cast. It has Jamie Lee Curtis, the original. Well, I'd say original. I mean, that would probably be like her mother in real life. But she's seen for a lot of people as like the Scream Queen for Halloween and other films. So having Jamie Lee Curtis herself be on Scream Queens, and then Emma Roberts, who was in Scream 4, is also one of the main characters, and KK Palmer was on it, Billy Lord, Abigail Breslin. So it had a pretty good cast. So yeah, I mean, I think that the whole idea of having characters that are genre savvy, but then a killer that is also genre savvy, just makes things a lot more like you have to stay one step ahead of the killer, but then the killer tries to stay, or killers try to stay one step ahead of you. And it's just like, how do you do that? So, I'll just mention one other thing is that the whole idea of spoilers now is like become very tricky. And, I think with the most recent Scream film, like certain things just popped up on social media, and then, I guess the studio would try to take them down. And I saw this one little video clip of, I guess Jenna Ortega and, Melissa, the actress who plays Better Sarah.
Yeah, the sister, yeah.
Sarah, her sister in the film. They were filming a scene, and they saw some. I guess they were filming the scene for the latest film. I guess not really a spoiler. It takes place at a university, and so some people, some real life students, were, I guess, filming stuff with their phones or whatever. They saw them up on like a few floors up, and they were on the ground, and they were like filming them, and Jenna Ortega was yelling at them, and like, "Don't spoil the movie! Don't spoil the movie! Don't." So it's very tricky now. You have all the devices, and people could just go be like, "Oh, look, I'm just gonna snap, Jenna Ortega, and wonder what she's doing around here." And oh, look, it's her co-star from the Scream franchise. Wonder what's going on. So it's gotten a lot tougher since Scream 2. The script leaked online. That was a big deal at that time.
Yes.
Now people gotten savvier. So yeah.
So for people that have just joined, we're gonna sort of do full spoilers for Scream 1 to 5, but we'll probably leave Scream 6 spoiler chat. If anybody wants to stay at the end, we might have a full spoiler chat, but aware that people might not have seen that one in the cinemas yet. Cody, what is your opinion on the Scream franchise?
Right. So, I don't like stupid, like, rip-off humour. I just don't. So I didn't like the Scary movies, right?
Okay.
But Scream was like an iconic movie. It was not, I don't think 1, 2 or 3, there is one scary scene in any of the movies, right? but you could watch them with your mates and your girls, and it was just stupid funny. It was actually, and the thing is, I'm English, so it's based in America, you know. So like half the conversations we had about how stupid they are, because all of Americans have got all the guns. And yet, the second you get a psycho killer in the midst, every gun within the state disappears. And so I loved these movies. I saw 1, 2, and thought they were connected, you know, it was the continuation of the story. And we really loved 1 and 2, all me and my friends, all through school, college, university. They were really big. The third one, I don't really remember the third one, so I can't really say it was bad. But that's the reason why I think it was bad, because I don't remember nothing. Like, I think I watched it, and in my brain, it went from being a silly... Because I don't really consider them horrors. I think it's a thriller. There's a psycho killer in the midst of a bunch of normal people in a normal place. That's a thriller movie. That's Insomnia, okay? So, but with stupid Americans as the victims. So it was brilliant. The third one... I felt that was where that's what I'm guessing, where it went to that silly, stupid, scary movie humour. So that was the last one I watched. When they come out with the fourth one, I was like, "You're kidding me!" And then I didn't watch the fourth, the fifth, and I haven't seen the sixth. We didn't consider it to be like anything that it wasn't. It was just a silly thriller movie, and there were so many references to other horror movies. I think that's what a lot of people where I was locked onto, the amount of references and silly, you know, like he's almost talking to the audience. One of the characters in the first movie broke the third wall, or they call it the fourth wall or something, like 8 times in the movie. Like literally turned to the audience and was like, "Oh," you know? So that's interaction with the audience. That's bringing us in to that comical, we know what's going to happen. You know, you hear the scary movie, don't tell someone you're going to come back later, or I'll see you in a minute, because you won't do. So, and that was a lot of it, the references. It was like, what was the other movie they did a lot of references? With the guy that plays the superhero. I can't remember. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. But yeah, really good. I liked them, and I'm going to watch them all tonight.
Cool. Thank you, Cody. Mark, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Everyone good? Good to see everyone.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, good, Richard. Hi, James as well. Hello, guys. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the thing that I haven't really got much to say on Scream, only because I like partly what Cody was saying. I sort of remember the first one. I watched a little bit of 6. I have got 6 recorded, and I watched a little bit of 6, just clips, because it caught my attention on YouTube. The thing I like, probably, or the thing was something that Cody alluded to, that I noticed with Scream, is like what Cody said, how much of a phenomenon it was, in that there was so many copycat films, like the comedy elements of, you know, Scary Movie, and then things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and films like that, which came out around the same time, which were clearly sort of influenced by Scream. I think the thing I like about Scream is, looking back on it now, is the meta sort of aspect of it, where you've got the 2 film buffs who, you know, kind of in the film are kind of referencing scary films in terms of trying to trace the killers. So yeah, that's probably, you know, what is quite good. I think it kind of came along at a time when the horror genre really needed reinventing, didn't it? I mean, like I'm not a big horror fan, but you know, it kind of spawned a lot of, in the 2000s, a lot of kind of that genre of teenagers, you know, sort of young American teenagers who kind of go off in the wrong direction, like films like Cabin Fever and things like that. And there's that one with that Australian killer, which I forget the name of now, but I think it's called Walkabout or something like that. But all these films kind of, you can clearly see that influence that Scream had. So yeah, I mean, they're just iconic, aren't they? Like what Cody says, in that they've spawned, you know, comedy spin-offs, they've spawned sort of copycat films. Yeah, so, you know, they're iconic. Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Anita, hello. What is your opinion on the Scream franchise?
Okay, yeah. So I haven't seen any since 2000. So yeah, I'm going on memory here. So this was quite a long time ago. Right. So yeah. I was quite surprised that I really enjoyed Scream One. I remember it definitely being my favourite. I did think it was quite scary. I was watching Scream One on my own, and the beginning I found very scary. Um, yeah, so then I got to, I think Scream 3 was about 2000. In 2004, I lived in Canada for a while, and the only TV channels we could get, even in that day and age, were true crime channels. That's when I really, really got into true crime. As most of you know, it's one of my favourite genres, if not my favourite. And I didn't realise, I was finding out all things about Zodiac, about In Cold Blood, which Truman Capote, very famous TV series, films, books, both of those. And I didn't realise that Scream was actually based on the murder of 5 students over 4 days in 1990 by the killer was Daniel Rowling, who was finally executed in 2006. So Scream 3 was 2000. When I realised that in 2004, I thought, I find this distasteful now. I find it really awful that this slasher style film was made based on a true story. It's really horrific, 5 students over 4 days. So it put me off. But do I want to go back? Am I curious now? Because I've forgotten all about them. Didn't realise, probably like Cody, that there was a 6. I've completely lost track of them. Am I curious? Do I want to see them? Actually, yes, I really do. So if we ever do another evening and another update, I'll let you know what I think of the other 3. But that is what put me off. I thought it was just a bit distasteful, because even things like Psycho, anything to do with Zodiac, anything to do in Cold Blood, it's not done in that style. And it was interesting because Andrew said about Columbine, which is actually 99. And then, as we said, Scream 3 was 2000. So it's interesting, you know, when you do think of things from the actual real life perspective. Anyway, yeah. As I said, though, when I first saw Scream 1 in 1996, I really, really did like it. So I am ending there on a positive note.
Thank you. Alfonso, are you there? You're not on camera, but he's just unmuted himself. Your opinion on Scream?
Well, I consider myself sort of a fan until I heard Andrew. I really have enjoyed this franchise. Not so much in the beginning. I really appreciated the first movie, but it was very scary when I saw it. And yeah, I think my favorites are the first and the second movie. But I don't know if it's because they were new at the time and they were something like, because it's like, you know, they comment on the genre. It was very something that you hadn't seen before. It was a genre that was ripe for parody in a sense. And Kevin Williamson really was the genre in the 90s. He did the slashers, this one and the I Know What You Did Last Summer, which defined the 90s, and also even the cinephilia, like of also being the creator of Dawson's Creek, which is all about movies as well. So it's like shows and films that they talk about movies, and they also love film at the same time. And and they are smart, and I don't know, it was cool, all that Kevin Williamson universe. And after that, Vampire Diaries, like he has a very good command of plotting. He does a lot of twists also in his TV shows, and he can do also romance with Dawson's Creek. It was great. Then Scream 3 he wasn't in the script, and it shows. And the new, Scream 4. I think he returned for Scream 4, and it was interesting the twist of the end, how it was, nicely done, but at the same time I thought it was, I don't know, it's like, I remember it wasn't very successful at the box office, and I was sad because I thought the Scream franchise was over. And then they rebooted, as they usually do, with Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera, which I think they fit their characters very well, because one is more does very well the face acting, and the other one has a very a quiet face, let's say. And they also always play with this kind of a daughter of a killer with that, but can also play very well the action. For that same reason, Melissa Barrera can play very well the action gal, like Sigourney Weaver, Alien style. She can go against any killer. And I also saw a little bit the TV show. I abandoned it because it was, I don't know, not very engaging to me. But overall, I think I will watch this franchise until the end of time. This is one of those things that I really like. It talks about movies. It has many twists. It's funny. It has so many elements that I like. And it was scary at the beginning. I even had nightmares with this when I first saw the first movies. I didn't find it very funny. Like the first scene with Drew Barrymore was totally violent, totally. Yeah. And I also these movies play a lot with connect with the feeling of being alone and scared, and like, yeah, that kind of like, it's not the same as if it's again, to my taste. This is like this kind of quick chasing person. The killer in scary movies, not like one of those killers that just goes like Halloween, he goes so slow. This guy, or whoever is behind the mask in each installment, they run so fast, and and in the beginning it was when the Drew Barrymore scene came, it was so fast, so you felt like it could be anywhere, and it felt like real danger. It felt like this guy went really for it. It wasn't like doom and gloom and inevitability. So it kind of felt like she could escape. Yeah, that's a master. I mean, it's a classic. The first one and even the second one to me are classics. So yeah, I also happened that in the first one I was going to the cinema. I was going to go to the movies with a group of friends, and they cannot ditch me. And so I also saw it in a state of not a very good mood. And I think also that all what made it even a little bit more disturbing in a sense. So yeah, I enjoy both, but I think as everything, it gets a little bit old after 6 installments of the same thing. Even though there are still, in this last movie, Scream 6, I found some scenes also kind of like, let's say, disturbing or with real danger. And in some other scenes, it felt like nothing mattered. So it was like it went very, very much from one place to the other, and it reminded me of like previous, like the first ones. And I guess that's why it also has a very good grade, because it kind of has a little bit that of like some scenes are very serious and some scenes are more like fun. So that would be it.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about Drew Barrymore. The thing now is that the first film is so memorable, and I found this rewatching Scream 1, is I might not have even seen it this millennium, right? And every scene I remembered so much about it. And it's not like a film that I watched over and over again. I think I'd only seen it 2, maybe 3 times. But it really, you remember so much about it. Very memorable opening scene. But obviously, the publicity that come out, there were 2 posters, and one was just a woman with a hand over her face and it said Scream, and the other one had the main cast. But actually, Drew Barrymore was, being the household name of the cast at the time, was kind of the one that you looked at the most. And they do the thing, that Psycho thing of killing off who you assume is going to be maybe the main character, but they don't even leave it like half an hour into the film. It's like in the first 10 minutes. So it's a very sort of scary opening, which I think it has to be.
Yeah.
There's
and also
sorry.
No, you're also like, it also feels like she might, at least the parents will see what is happening and they don't, and it's like it's really well constructed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Roger Jackson, of course, does the voice, as he does throughout all 6 installments, and I think did return to the TV. I haven't seen the TV show, but they did bring him on board for the last series. I think they got an impressionist for the first one, so he's a bit of continuity between the installments as well. They've always got this thing of having to balance the humor and the horror, and I think in 3 there's just a little bit too much horror, a little bit too much humor. Sorry, that it kind of undermines the scariness of it. And it's far more. It's almost like they're patting themselves on the back with all the meta gags and stuff. And you've got cameos from people like Kevin Smith and Carrie Fisher, which they would be funnier if it was a better movie. But I think by the time they turn up, you're kind of like, this one's not working for some reason, and I can't work out why.
Also, Serenity in Hollywood was so meta. It takes you out of the reality. It makes you feel too much that you're in a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the balance they're trying to walk with it. I mean, I did rewatch Wes Craven's New Nightmare as well, which he did in 1994. And that is a very meta film. So the idea of that film is the cast from the original Nightmare on Elm Street are filming a sequel, but Freddy is kind of coming to life and Freddy Krueger is coming to life and killing people in the cast and people on the crew. And Wes Craven plays himself in that, as does one of the studio execs. And it's very meta, and you can sort of see the seeds for Scream a little bit in that, and particularly Scream 2, when they introduce the idea that Stab is now a franchise within the Scream franchise. I really like in the new 2 that they've done, 5 and 6, that I sort of really believe in the 2 new protagonists. And I really feel like when they're in danger, I'm kind of scared for them. And I agree with Richard. I don't think it's just that you saw it in the cinema, Richard. I think they have kind of cranked the horror up a bit to just make it a little bit scarier.
Especially the first scene. I think, again, like the first one, I think the very long scene before the title appears in Scream 6, for me, is extremely scary, to be honest.
Yeah, and I did. This isn't really. Oh no, it is a spoiler, so I'll stay off it for a while. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got anything else they want to say about Scream at all.
I have an Easter egg. Maybe I'm wrong, but because you mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street, am I wrong to say that there is a street in Woodsboro called Elm Street?
Yes, there's Elm something, isn't there?
Yeah, I noticed that at one scene. I was thinking, okay, that's funny, to be honest. Okay.
There is a scene as well which I did. Maybe it just went over my head the first time I watched it, but the Fonz is the headmaster, isn't he?
Yeah.
Henry Winkler, yeah.
And someone disturbs him at the school, and he looks outside and says, who made that noise? And a janitor looks up and says something. He says, "Don't worry, Fred." and Fred has like a striped shirt like Freddy Krueger as well.
Yeah.
It's not Robert Englund, but it's clearly a nod towards that, isn't it? But it that's sort of really well balanced, I think, because the fact it probably went over my head the first time, and then the second, and I think in the fifth one there's some stuff as well that's just quite well delivered. There's a bit where I forgot the actor's name, but Huey from The Boys is like watching the Stab franchise catching up with it, and he says this whole franchise falls apart at number 5.
Oh, you mean Jack Quaid?
Jack Quaid. So, so little things like that I think really good.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of the things, the names too, like you may have already mentioned, like Loomis reference to Psycho and Halloween, or having the Carpenter sisters, like John Carpenter. So a lot of things with the names, or just other little things, little tidbits there are kind of like nods to other horror franchises.
Even the start of Scream 1, when Drew Barrymore's on the phone and has the initial "What's your scary movie?" conversation, she says, "I like the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but only the first one's good," which of course is only the first one's the only one that Craven did, if you discount New Nightmare, which is kind of like a spin-off thing. So yeah, there's probably videos on YouTube like assembling all these Easter eggs, but there's a lot. There really is.
Can we talk about something else before we move to Scream 6? I have a little thing to add. We didn't. I mean, obviously, the two main original characters are played by Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox. But actually, there's a third one, and it's fine because it's within the first 5 movies, so we can talk about it. Obviously, if I'm not mistaken, until Scream franchise, I'm not sure that David Arquette had a very successful career, to be honest. I'm not an expert, but I don't think actually that except for the role of Dewey, I'm not sure that he has a huge amount of popular roles in his filmography.
Well, his family is famous. But,
His family, of course. But I think David Arquette is... his character, not him. I mentioned that to James the other day. I think that, unfortunately for him, in the first 3 or 4 movies, his character is just useless. he's the most useless. He's the most useless policeman in the world. He's weak. He's always scared, and for some reason, he always survives. I was saying that he becomes Superman actually is a counterexample of my theory, because he's been stabbed and shot in every single movie. In the end, in the 5th one, where actually I believe that actually he was maybe given his best performance because his character was much more interesting, because he was like a broken guy, which makes sense, by the way, because when you think about it, it's surprising that neither Courtney Cox character nor Neve Campbell character didn't have more what's the word, PTSD, or
they don't have that, do they? Like Jamie Lee Curtis in the new Halloweens or something.
When you survive 4 times something like that, you should actually have issues that stay all your life. He definitely has them at the beginning of the 5th one, and is showing up to actually protect the new generation. He's facing dead-on Ghostface. He dies. That's what I'm saying, that actually we can talk about it because it's within Scream 5. But he dies like, I'm going to speak like a very young guy, like a very, like a G, whatever, like a very, actually, very cool character, very brave one. And in a way, not only redeems his character, but I think he almost redeemed the character development for the 4 previous movies in a way. Because I said, I saw a video online of a guy joking around the number of times that Dewey falls in Scream 2 and Scream 3. He falls every time. I know that he is a bit injured from the first movie, but still, he looks like an idiot all the time because he's useless. He's trying to protect Courtney Cox, and every time he fails, or he just saved her by chance. But in the 5th one, he's definitely almost the hero of the story. So, I thought it was a very good note to end his character.
It's funny how David Arquette has been working consistently. Like he's in 142 productions according to IMDb, and I am watching what he has done.
Really?
I mean, like he's
142.
working consistently throughout the years, and in stuff that nobody watches. Maybe Mark, I don't know. It's like nobody watches these things, but it's his every year 2 or 3 or 4 things.
Okay.
Mark, you've got your hand up. Do you think Dewey dies like a G?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm interested. Richard, I think Richard makes a really interesting point in that I never thought about it until what Richard was saying. I think Dewey does kind of personify sort of tropes, police officer tropes in these kind of films. You've always got a few tropes with police officers, right? You've always got the sort of chief, in these American small town things where there's always like a sheriff and a deputy, or like a couple of deputies, and the sheriff's all usually overweight, balding, sort of middle-aged white guy who's seen it all, is like a bit miserable usually. So that's one, and then Dewey's sort of the other type of trope of the young guy, the young sort of deputy type who's a bit inexperienced but kind of also quite enthusiastic, kind of may die in some of these films. But it's interesting, to what Richard says, because I hadn't really thought about it until he said that. And I do remember, obviously, in Scary Movie, there's the trope of like when they're showing the pictures, hit that, sort of the more experienced police officer. I'm guessing that's in Scream. It must be if it's based on it. But yeah, Dewey, I guess he personifies that kind of trope of like the sort of younger. I mean, I think of someone else. I think of just off my head being in that kind of role is in Rambo. David, what's his second name? He's in CSI Miami now, but he's like the young police officer in that who kind of personifies that kind of young police officer who's enthusiastic in a small town type of trope. But it's interesting. I mean, I kind of remember the character from Scary Movie as well, Special Officer Doofy. Which is quite funny. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how those films kind of had some of those tropes in them.
Yeah, I think I mean, you've obviously got Courtney Cox in the first two, and Friends started in 1995. I can't remember now if Friends was an instant hit or if it took a series to catch on. And I can't remember if it was as big in the UK at exactly the same time as the US, because there'd often be a delay, or things that were a hit in the US would suddenly get exported to us. But her style of comedy from Friends is definitely in those early movies. One of the very few things that I don't like about Five, actually, or I think jars slightly, is Courtney Cox still doing that style of humor, and it doesn't seem to be quite as like in the mix. It sort of stands out a little bit. But the thing in two that I'm really not sure about is there's jokes about some of her co-stars, but obviously these are made by the character. So there's a joke about Jennifer Aniston, and David Schwimmer is meant to have been in the first Stab movie. Yeah. And it's a little bit like this isn't a spoiler, trust me, but in Creed 3, there's a moment when they're playing a rap song, and there's a very clear lyric about Wakanda in it. And it sort of just threw me very momentarily out of the movie, because I'm like, well, hang on, this is, like, we've got the same director who is in that film, Michael B. Jordan. But it's so brief and it's from a song that it kind of doesn't matter too much. I know they're deliberately doing that in Scream, but some of those things and I think Scream 2 is good enough that it kind of gets away with it. I think if they were doing that all the time in Scream 3, and I think they do mention David Schwimmer again, it just feels a little bit overly meta, because you're suddenly going, well, hang on, that person's famous from Friends, but she's in that, and it's just... It's a little bit too much. But I think it really probably helped those early films to have the juxtaposition of the horror and the comedy, because a lot of these sort of slashers had died out. You'd had really good ones in the 70s, 80s, and then a lot of them were sort of increasingly going very fast to VHS. And obviously we were mentioning things like I Know What You Did Last Summer, but Halloween got a fresh reboot sort of just a few years after Scream, and then there's Halloween Resurrection, which isn't thought of particularly well. But thinking about it now, where that took place a few years after the original Scream trilogy, so I think Halloween Resurrection came out in 2002. You know, it's all teenagers and it's about reality TV, and there's a lot of jokes in it which I don't think really fit with the Halloween franchise, but I'm sure they were looking to try and make it a little bit like that. And even I think something like Final Destination, in a way, it's not really a slasher in a way, although I suppose death is the killer and it's going to get you, and there's a added layer of different ways that people are dispatched, but it's definitely got that, the juxtaposition of the humor and the horror side by side, which seemed to really work. And I think Wes Craven had just really tapped into the audiences were getting very familiar with the way these films worked. So rather than pretend that they weren't, kind of embrace that and go, okay, let's try and throw some meta layers on this to try and, you know, just screw with people's heads a little bit more. Mark.
Well, just thinking of something you mentioned there, James, only off the top of my head. Of course, a couple of films, they're not very good, but kind of took that idea, because I was thinking about, as you're talking, I was thinking about different genres and things that, you know, sci-fi was one. I thought, you know, Alien, Predator, and of course the Alien versus Predator, I think it was the second one, kind of took that element of high school teens and all that kind of thing. And, you know, it's in that small town. There's a bit when I think an alien jumps in a pool and there's loads of sort of, you know, teenagers messing around in a pool. It's not really what you want to see from a Predator or Alien film, but yeah, of course there is that as well. So that seems to be a common theme, doesn't it? Like 20-year-old Americans who are playing teenagers in a film, kind of like going into some situation that they shouldn't, with some kind of killers, become a very popular kind of trope, should we say, in films. And of course, Cabin in the Woods is a good example of doing that with probably quite a good sort of like twist and things. But yeah.
And I did watch, since you mentioned Scary Movie, Mark, I did watch that because I'd never seen it before. I've got to say, I did laugh a lot. It's currently on Netflix, I think only for a couple more days. It's one of those things, though. It's nearly 25 years old. I think it came out like a matter of months after Scream 3. There were some really funny jokes in it. There were some jokes that definitely haven't aged well, but it's definitely a film made by someone who knows their horror, because it's primarily sending up the original Scream, which is weird because it's kind of a parody of a parody. But there are other scenes which are sending up other sort of films. So The Sixth Sense is certainly one in there. It actually sends up the Budweiser Was Up commercial, because I was sat there thinking, this is a weird thing. I was like, no, the Was Up commercial was probably about that same time, which is probably why they did that. It did amuse me as well that the Scream mask that is worn in that film actually changes expression depending on what's going on. So when it's baffled, it kind of looks a little bit, you know, sad or something. And then they have a scene where it's completely stoned as well, and like its eyes are closed and its mouth is just smiling. But they'll change it between cuts, so it's not even individual scenes that they'll have that. I mean, there's somebody. It's great talking about this one because you can't really spoil it because the plot means absolutely nothing. But there's a scene where someone's decapitated and the head just carries on talking. Like, it's like, oh, this is so predictable. You've decapitated me. So I did enjoy that. I don't know if I'm going to watch like 2 to 5. I think there's 5 Scary Movies overall. So it actually got to the point where Scary Movie had done more films than Scream. But they haven't done one for about 10 years. So I'm sure with these new Scream films, though, they'll do some more.
Yeah, I like the Usual Suspect ending.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it is a really funny film. I mean, like there are so many jokes in it, you know, even if you think it's a bit cheesy, it's definitely packed full of jokes. Cool. Does anybody want to talk about anything else before we can do a spoiler bit on Scream 6? I mean, we could talk about Scream 6 without sort of saying exactly what happens at the end, couldn't we? So
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's funny because when Scream 5 came out last year, someone had said to me about it, and I was just not interested. It was just not on my radar. And then having watched it, I really liked it. I do agree with what Richard said. Watching them all back to back, it feels like a lot. And particularly after Scream 3, I think going into Scream 4, I was like, is this a good idea? But Scream 4 was much better than I remembered because I had seen that at the cinema. And I like the way the original trilogy is primarily about slashers and that sort of meta textual thing on that genre. The fourth one is kind of a little bit more about social media, I think. And then these new two are just about franchises generally, I think. So there's a whole speech in the new one about a bunch of franchises, and they're not horror franchises. They're all very well-known big IPs. And I think it's quite clever what they're doing. I think it's the timing's like really right as well, because we've got so many of these things, so many IPs, that it just feels like perfect that they've brought this back at this time. And I think that's the other thing, is this is run over like 4 decades, but they've only done 6 films. So it's not like the MCU where they're trotting out like 4 films a year. They've been spread out. The only thing in 6, and I think someone else, it might have been Richard, touched on it with 5. Certainly in 6, there's a character who survives something, which is not survivable.
Impossible.
I was glad that I was gutted when that character seemed to die, but when that character is back, I'm like, or has revealed to survive. You go, but they wouldn't have survived that. They just people can, and they do, but not a sustained thing like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah,
because by the way, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that kind of takes away part of the horror as well, because if you think, well, there's no jeopardy here because people can get attacked and they'll just live, the characters, then it's not scary. I will say that someone I know said there was a really long trailer, and I didn't see that, so I wasn't aware of anything that happened. There's just a very short teaser that I've been seeing, which is genius, which is a scene on a subway.
Oh, that's an amazing scene. That's a great scene.
And it's so simple, but it's very effective. There's someone wearing the mask. It's Halloween, and everybody's got these masks on, so you don't know who could be the real ghost face. And then each time the lights go out, one of these figures gets a little bit closer each time, and it's very effective.
I really enjoy that scene. But I don't know. Do you think we can talk about a bit about spoilers or not?
Yeah, I think you're bothering on spoilers. And if you want to talk about it with spoilers, you should just say it.
Okay, good point. Okay, so because to address what James was just saying, I need to address one spoiler. I will not talk about the killer if you want, but about bad guy, for example. It's
actually things of issues. Yeah,
that's the symbol of what I was mentioning. Is that even before this character, survival makes no sense. When you think about the whole franchise, it's true that these people have been stabbed and shot so many times. Already Dewey mentioned this before dying in Scream 5, which is fine. Okay, in that case of Dewey, if we take an example, that guy has been stabbed I don't know how many times, but at least across different movies. So he's just very unlucky. But at the same time, very lucky because every time he survives, you think that he's dead. But it's just that he's not consistent. There's no constance about how you kill someone in these movies. Because again, in Scream 6 is definitely clear. So this character we keep not mentioning is Chad, I believe. He's kind of the love interest of Jenna Ortega character. So this guy already should have died at the end of Scream 5, by the way. This guy already, the way he was stabbed for me in Scream 5, I was very surprised he survived Scream 5. I said, all right, fair enough. Then went into Scream 6, and then so let's get into details of that scene that makes no sense to me, is that they are running around this room, Jenna Ortega, her sister, and him. And I'm guessing that the intention was that because he loves Jenna Ortega, he says he's going to sacrifice himself because he is kind of ambushed, of a lack of better word, ambushed by two killers at that point, who keeps stabbing, and I think I'm counting at least 12 times. At least 12 times he's been stabbed. And the way actually that scene is shot even, and the way he acts, everybody, I'm sure that if you do a survey, everybody in the world who watches that scene is believing that he's going to die at that point. Because he says something like, I don't know, I love you or something like that, or run away. Like he, as I said, he in a way, they focus on me, so you have the time to run, etc. So it's so strange. I have no idea. Again, talking about behind the scenes, like Andrew was talking about writing process, it would be interesting to see if it was the intention in the first place to have him die, and then they change their minds and say, okay, he's kind of a love interest of Jenna Ortega. We might need him for next movies, so let's bring him back.
Well, I actually going to say. Well, I was just going to say briefly to that, not so much with that character, but supposedly during the development, Neve Campbell was attached, then she wasn't because of salary disputes or something. Yeah. So supposedly there were, and I remember hearing from one of the people involved that there were some rewrites because of her lack of involvement, or Sydney character not being in the film. So I'm kind of curious what the changes were, not just with regards to the character you're describing, but to another character where it looks like they're like a goner and then they're not.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder if it's something that changed because of Neve Campbell not being involved anymore, at least for this particular film. I don't know about the future.
I think that this whole new reboot second part of the franchise, they just have assumed that they can revive anyone. So from the very first scene when
it's the MCU.
Jenna Ortega, she is the first one in the fifth film. She gets stabbed in her home, and she seems to be like dead, and she survived. And from then on, they could get anyone that had been stabbed from any other installment. And I think they made kind of a marketing, some kind of survey or something, like which characters did you like the most, or which actors do you think are going to be big stars? And they were
it's like that character who returns to this film. Yeah. There's a character.
Kirby is definitely dead.
Hayden
Payton, but she's back in this one.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's a spoiler and what's not a spoiler, but there are two. I mean, spoiler alert, because I'm gonna say it. I don't know. The brother and sister, I think they are very good actors, and they are both back. I mean, they bet on Jenna Ortega, on Melissa Barrera, on this Mason Gooding, on the other girl who is now also on Yellow Jackets. And I think the four of them are very good and are going to be stars and everything. So it's only logical to just get them along for the ride as much as they can.
Yeah.
I think with the Neve Campbell thing, it was a salary dispute, wasn't it? The directors have said it hasn't changed the script. Now, that doesn't make sense because if her not taking part hasn't changed the script, then she was in the film, but they gave her no scenes originally. Do you know what I mean?
I heard the opposite from someone else who's involved, so that's kind of weird.
I think what almost certainly would have been the case in the original script is that her role would have been stripped down, and certainly Courtney Cox's role is basically one sequence in the middle, even though she is top. Yeah, because they have this weird billing thing on it as well. When you watch the end credits, they put everyone in alphabetical order, and it's only at the end of Scream 5 I realised they then go with David Arquette, Courtney Cox, and Neve Campbell, and they kind of give them like a with and billing right at the end.
Yeah,
and they do the same with Courtney Cox here. But when you watch the cast list scroll up, Courtney Cox is billed top. Now she's definitely not the protagonist. In this film, in the Scream 5, and I did put that in the chat, I think, Richard, when we were talking about this, I said I was quite impressed that in Scream 5, the first half hour there's no legacy characters, as they call them, and I was completely engaged. And it's literally about 30 minutes in that you get Dewey back for the first time. So they're definitely doing that in that one, but particularly towards the end of Scream 5, you get, Neve Campbell. It's like that Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox back kicking ass, and it's very much just as much their film as it is the new characters. This sort of feels like Courtney Cox is just in that bit because they needed to have a legacy character. So I don't know what Neve Campbell would have done. It's certainly disrespectful to her as like an actress who's been in it for years, if that's the case. But it's strange because I thought, how is this going to play without her in it? Because as someone who hasn't watched these films over and over again, I kind of think of Courtney Cox as the main star because she's the most famous, but it's definitely Sidney Prescott is the main character. She's Ripley.
For sure.
But in actual fact, what they say in this film makes more sense. That the killer is on the rampage again, and she's gone into hiding. Like, why hasn't she done that? Like from Scream 2 on?
Well, that's what she tried to do in the third film, but it didn't work out too well. So I guess.
Yeah. So, but this is part of the. I've seen this as a criticism of some of these films as well. That they say, people don't react like people would in real life, but in all these films, they all run back to the same neighborhood and get.
Yeah. That's actually something that I joked around with a colleague of mine. I say, my God, I'm watching this Scream marathon this week, and I said, but now we are still in the fourth one, and there are still people living in Woodsboro. Why are there still people living in Woodsboro?
Because that's where
the real estate
has to return. The killer asked for Sydney. Sydney, come back, please.
It's the cursed city. I'm guessing that maybe the price of the houses must be so low. But that's what it was saying. But
I think as well, although the sequence on the subway in Scream 6 is fantastic, I think if you lived in Woodsboro, right, and that was consistently happening, they would say that mask is banned, right? You're not allowed to wear that mask anymore. Anyone caught wearing that mask is getting nicked. End of story. Yeah. But everybody's out, and the tension is who is wearing this for a joke and who is actually the killer. But, yeah.
I also thought that Courtney Cox was given a more meaty role than in other films of the Scream franchise this time because of not having Sidney Prescott. All the dialogue that she has with the killer while on the phone, it's really good this time. Like it's also taking into account everything that has happened with her. It's more about her than the other films where she was just like, oh, the reporter that nobody wants around, but she's there and she's smart. And this time it's like, why you were the protagonist, huh? You were always like around, but this time, are you not hurt by not being the film's not being about you, being about Sydney, something like that?
Well, because the fact that Dewey has been killed, and obviously they're married in the films, eventually in Scream 4, I think they're married, and then they're divorced by 5, and that their relationship has paralleled what's happened. So that they must have met on the set of Scream 1. They then are married. I don't know if it's by the time Scream 3 comes along. I think Scream 4 in real life, they were separated, but it wasn't public. So they filmed that together, and they've got a child together in real life. But in Scream 5, there's a conversation when the characters are talking about their failed marriage, and obviously the actors are now divorced. And I found that a little bit odd to watch. I felt like I was sort of intruding on someone's private life in that sequence, because it's all very well when it's sort of like the early days and it's a bit like a rom-com, are these characters going to get together? But when they're kind of looking back on their mistakes and stuff, it feels a little bit close to the bone. But I mean, they both agreed to do it, and maybe the things that they're saying aren't true of the real people. So, but Courtney Cox is, I mean, in Scream 6, I think I'll sort of say this in as unspoilery a way as possible, but people know what I mean. Like, you kind of think, well, this she's the only legacy character coming back, and they're making a big thing about things moving on. So in the lead up to the section that we get, I'm thinking this is Courtney Cox's last film in this franchise.
I thought so too.
So the terror and the horror in the sequence that we get, it feels very real because I'm feeling she's not going to get out of what happens. And then, we get the sequence and that. So that was my feeling. And that's another part of the film where it feels like they wanted to do something and then they kind of maybe changed their minds a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know how good that is. That actually reminds me of like going into Avengers Endgame and feeling they were making such a big thing about this being the end. And I thought, but is it? Are they're gonna say they're gonna bump off characters and then they won't? They'll backtrack. And I was kind of impressed that they did follow through with that, And I think if you've got a franchise, you don't want to get to the point where you just don't believe that people are going to get stabbed 50 times and then they'll just be in the next sequel. I don't think that's going to do it any.
Right, you want there to be.
It doesn't benefit anybody. I don't think.
Yeah, it's that way you become more vested. I was actually thinking of another franchise recently, which I'm not going to spoil because it's a different franchise, but sort of like, are they going to make it or aren't they? And but yeah, you see stuff happen and you want to get like vested, and then it's sort of like you feel cheated if they're like, oh, but they somehow survived. And I think it also goes back to the requel thing that they talk about in the previous film. The idea that you want to focus on new characters, but then you just bring in the legacy characters sort of like for the climax. That happened sort of with the more recent Star Wars trilogy and then Ghostbusters. So I guess they kind of did that with Scream 5 and maybe a little bit of Scream 6, sort of, but I think it's kind of one of the things that made it interesting, the whole meta thing, the idea of like, this is like a new thing to do, something where you want to focus, you want to do it in the same continuity, you focus on new characters, but then to bring in for the fan service in the family-friendly sense, bring in the legacy characters to say, "Hi, they're from the other film," or "They're from the previous film," get all excited. So I guess they tried to do that with this film a little bit, Courtney Cox and then Kirby, I guess, which kind of made people go, So, but I don't know where we would go from here. If it's like, what's the next big thing after a requel? I mean, I don't know.
Do you mean generally, or in terms of this franchise? Just
both. Well, so the meta. It's both, actually.
I mean, the thing I really hate the term torch pass. It does my head in because I think I hate it. But it's not a torch pass if you just keep the legacy characters going anyway. Because you're not passing the torch, you're hanging on to it. So this idea of torch passing, but constantly having the legacy characters, I think I'm more invested in the new characters. I mean, there's not many of the old characters remaining in Scream now, but I think Jenny Artigo, I've not really seen anything. I know a lot of you have watched her in Wednesday and things.
Oh, X, yeah.
Oh, of course, in X, which is fantastic. And right, I've got to do this.
But she also did some Disney stuff.
Pearl has finally come out in the UK, Andrew, and it's brilliant. It's
so right. Well, she's not in so good. But yeah.
We got it nearly 8 months later. It's a prequel. I had no expectations or anything of it, and it's so good. It's like it's sort of the same tone but a completely different movie. And Mia Goth is fantastic, and really recommend that as a horror.
I think right now, what is going to happen in the next installment is like, if in the first of the requel they were in Wattsboro, in the second of the requel they are at university and they are following Scream 1 and Scream 2, what's going to be Scream 7?
Yeah,
I guess it's going to be Scream 3, but how are they going to do it? Are they going to be doing TikToks, or are they going to be?
Well,
are they going to be doing?
Well, I mean, are they going to do what they originally planned and have like a cult, or does that mean they go back to Hollywood? I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think Scream 3 didn't work. So
that's because they didn't do what they originally wanted, which is the cult thing. They had to change it because of the real life.
Well, maybe they'll actually do that. Maybe now enough time's passed that they'll think they can do that. I think if they're smart, what they'll do is try and do a concluding chapter to that trilogy. So using those characters. I mean, maybe the reason Chad keeps surviving is that this is all some part of his master plan somehow. We'll see how he survived, because this is the thing that goes back to Scream 1, that the love interest is apparently stabbed, but then turns around and says it's ketchup. And
well, I think they also wanted
the thing as well that if you get stabbed continuously, but it's always in the same wound, it doesn't. It's just like being stabbed once, you know. Yeah. But it's very unlikely, isn't it?
I think they also want to do something with the whole. I guess is it Sam or Tara? Is the daughter of Billy?
Yeah,
I guess like that. Like idea she's going to follow in her father's. I
do really like that, because going into Scream 5, there was a constant tension I felt of it's going to be her. This is all in her mind, I was thinking. So it's going to be a thing where she's doing this but blocking it out or something. And I like that she seems to be at war. She is definitely Billy Loomis's daughter, and she has these visions of him. Presumably, either Skeet, what's his name, Skeet Ulrich, the actor, either he moisturizes or he's digitally de-aged, because he looks really good.
I have an idea. So you know that I love theories. For people who know me, I love theories. So that's my theory: that indeed Scream 7 will be whatever the name of the actress is, the older brother or sister of Jenna Ortega, will be the killer, but actually there will be a mastermind, so there will be a second killer who actually is in a wheelchair, and that's Stu, because there is a theory online of Stu, the guy from the first movie, who is still alive for some reason, but he is too much injured, so he cannot kill people, literally, so he's manipulating her to becoming the real new Billy Loomis, and she does become Ghostface for most of the movie, but then there's a redemption arc where actually she kills Stu and then dies with him. And that's the end of the trilogy.
Right, Richard,
I don't think they're gonna
can you start actually writing some of these down, because you're writing better ideas than I'm seeing.
I think that was one of the things they originally wanted to do for Scream 3. Not that specifically, but some general concept. That's something they originally wanted, but again, the whole Columbine thing. So maybe if they do something like that.
Because there is a shot in Scream 6 when the FBI girl and the guy who actually becomes the killer at the end look at the wall, and they look at all the killers. There is a picture of Stu, and it's a stupid thing, but they mention, I think, every single killer of the past years, but not him. But there is a shot at him. So I wonder if it's not like a kind of foreshadowing.
I think the one person that I haven't talked about much, but they have brought her up sometimes, is the mother of like Billy.
But she's dead. She's dead.
She's dead?
Yeah, Scream 2.
Yeah,
she's one of the killers.
In Scream 2.
Her and that guy Mickey. Yeah.
Okay, that was the mother.
Yeah.
Okay. There was another mother. I read it on Twitter. Sorry. Another mother. Another mother from another person. Maybe it's the mother of her, of
well, that gets into spoilers.
Barbara.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. The mother left them, so yeah.
You mean Sydney's mother?
No, the mother of Jenna Ortega and Melissa thingy. That's what you're talking about, Alfonso, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's right. She left or something. Yeah.
Yeah, one of them. I don't know who it was. Her or her sister. Can I say also a spoiler alert about 6? How can you not research everyone's relatives from?
Especially in the modern, especially if they're like a certain public figure type, you would think it'd be obvious.
Yeah. I mean, it's your freaking roommate.
Especially if you have a certain type of job. You think in that particular job, that would be like an important thing to research.
Yeah, and it happens so many times, but as I said before, except for maybe one movie, every time the killer is related to either Sidney Prescott or Billy Loomis. So in that case, you can think, okay, maybe he's related to the new guy of the last time.
Well, see, in Scream 3, at least you could get by because IMDb was sort of like relatively new, so they maybe didn't necessarily know. But like in that context, but like for a Scream 6, like you would think for someone who's like of a certain job, it would be like a requirement to say, okay, this person's in fit for that job because of, or to do certain things for that job because of their connection.
Yeah, I mean, if you have person who has died, who was the killer of the other movie, how can you not know their family?
Jason is here.
Been around in the background. I haven't
Jason,
seen 5 or
you
6. So I
turned
can't...
up in a Scream mask and like revealed who you were. Like,
Yes, I was almost tempted. Yeah. But Scream itself, it kind of became its genre in itself because it was at a time when slasher movies needed some reinvention. They were so exhausted. You'd had the Freddy Krueger franchise and the kind of like Jason Halloween, but then he kind of like, even though he created those eras of iconic killers, this was a kind of almost a reinvention of that genre where, and it spawned, like you mentioned before, Scream and everything else like that. So it became, which allowed it to survive the next 10, 20 years, I suppose, and everything that it influenced.
we said Final Destination was sort of a similar comedic horror thing, wasn't it? That lasted, was there like 5 or 6 of those?
There was that, but there was also J-horror was like a thing for a time, or at least to do, I guess, English language or American remakes of like The Grudge and Ring.
Yeah.
Because it came so self-aware that it kind of like those where people knew the rules of killing, like Final Destination, even that, like people knew what the rules were, or they figured it out. It wasn't some, unimaginable horror and you just poor teenagers running for their lives, but it was, here are the rules of the game and this is what you expect to happen, and either happens or it doesn't.
I think the satirical aspect as well, with these films being over a long period of time, when there's a gap, there's new things in the world to talk about. So we were saying like the originals are about the slashers that preceded them. The new ones are kind of about franchises in general. The fourth one we were saying was about social media, but Andrew's just reminded me there's another kind of gag in the fourth one where Kirby is asked what remake of an 80s film, and she just blurts out a ton, because it was that point in the noughties where they seem to remake all the classic horrors of the 80s, 70s and 80s, but in that kind of Eli Roth Hostel Saw sort of style. They all looked really sort of
torture porn,
brown and that
they
all
like
sort
Friday
of
the 13th
that. And she reels off, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. They had reboots by that point.
Because we've seen so many of killings over the decades. It can't help but lean into kind of like being self-aware or just comedic and everything like that. But to take it seriously, I think in American cinema it's hard to, because there's so much of a history to it now. The audiences are very savvy. Oh, it's like this, or it's a clone of this. But
I did think in 6 there was a couple of bits, like even in the opening sequence, where they kind of play on your expectations. So the very first opening sequence doesn't entirely play out how you think it's going to play out. That's all I'll say. I'll be deliberately vague, but there's a way
and they also have
progress, and they do something where you go, oh, okay, and then they sort of flip on that.
And you think it's going to go one way, and then it's like, oh, okay, but that we're not doing that.
And actually, in 5, I will have to watch 5 again because I was really impressed with it. There's a bit where they keep doing that thing, and it's always very effective. Of, the music heightened, someone's on their own, someone goes into the fridge, and then the fridge closes, and the killer's always behind the door, aren't they? And this character keeps going back to the fridge, and it never happens. They keep like luring you, thinking that's going to happen. There's even a bit where I think the killer Ghostface is saying like in that film Psycho, and a character's in the shower, and they shoot the next sequence like Psycho, all the same shots, and the character doesn't die. But it puts you in that frame of mind, like, oh, I know what's going to happen, and then they deliberately don't do it. But it's not like that breaks the tension; it just keeps it going because you know something's going to happen eventually. But it's really meta that kind of going, right, this is what people expect, so we're deliberately not going to do it.
Yeah, it's integral to the franchise. Subverting your expectations is what they have to do in each chapter.
Yeah, because
talking about it, explaining it.
Yeah, in Scream 4, they also have the opening where it's like, oh, you think, you're watching something and something's going to happen, but then something does happen, but it turns out it's actually part of like a movie or something.
Isn't it a film within a film within a film within a film?
And they're all like featuring like different celebrities or semi-celebrities. So it's sort of like, okay, now they're just messing with everything. So
yeah. There is a nice thing in 5 as well with one of the characters, because that's the first one after Wes Craven died, 5, isn't it? So a character dies called Wes in the film, and when they toast and say for Wes, apparently all the voices you hear are cast members from other Wes Craven films that all dub their voice over. So it kind of doubles up as a tribute for the character, but also a tribute for Wes Craven. I think that's quite a nice little Easter egg.
Wow. Okay. Right. Well, thanks, James. I'll start recording if there's anything else.
Well, thank you for joining us on the filmandtvreview.com podcast.
All right, then. All right. Thanks, James, for that. And that was our Scream special at Film and TV Review. See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this Film and TVReview.com episode. Catch the latest film and TV reviews, together with regular episode content from the world of film and TV every week. See you soon. Would you like to reach our Film and TV Review podcast audience? Do you have a product or service of interest to film and TV home consumers or followers of the entertainment industry? Have a film or show production to publicize? For affordable price plans for all budgets, get in touch and find out about our introductory advertising options. Reach our audience of film and TV viewers and visit our site contact page at filmandtvreview.com, or you can email us at business@filmandtvreview.com. Reach out today.